Hello, my name is Stacy Moore, and today I'd like to talk to you about the importance of creating a single coordinating federal agency for cybersecurity incidents. Additionally, I would also like to discuss the importance of creating a combined international effort to address cybersecurity incidents, as well as creating a solid deterrence policy for cyber attack. As we all know, the instance of cybersecurity incidents has proliferated across the entire federal government and through the private sector over the last few years. Some of the most salient examples would be the massive breach of information from federal employees, personally identifiable information related to those with security clearance, as well as the attack by North Korea on Sony Pictures in response to the release of their movie The Interview. These types of incidents not only impact our state of national security, but also impact our citizens' rights to express freedom of speech and to share information with those around the world. These are very important concepts as we look towards a future where we are increasingly reliant on the internet. It's very important that our government takes steps to increase the security of the network for everyone. This is an extraordinarily difficult task, as the current policy is a complicated web of presidential policy directives, legislation, and internal departmental policy that seems unenforceable by any one federal agency and is entirely voluntary to all of our private sector partners, who we know are very important to the security of the internet because the infrastructure upon which the network relies is primarily held in private hands. Thus, it's important for us to have a single federal responder for these types of incidents to streamline the response and to coordinate efforts across the federal interagency. This, I feel, can best be accomplished by the NCIC, which is held under the Department of Homeland Security. The current framework for the NCIC is sound. It has limited authority, however, because of the lack of clear presidential policy guidance and a lack of legislation from the Congress. Now, it's become more and more obvious that the Congress will not pass legislation anytime soon to clarify the authorities for cybersecurity incidents. However, it appears, based on precedent, that the President can give a presidential policy directive that provides the Department of Homeland Security, and by proxy then the NCIC, the appropriate authority to hold the federal interagency accountable for cybersecurity measures, which would greatly enhance the security of the network. One of the major roadblocks to this, though, is that the Department of Homeland Security has not built a strong reputation for securing itself. As the federal lead for cybersecurity incidents, it would be expected that the Department of Homeland Security would have a sterling cybersecurity record. However, they have shown over the past 2 or 3 years, particularly through Senate and GAO reports, that they have a massive problem with properly updating their software and following basic internet hygiene like updating software and creating strong passwords to protect data. These things are overcomable, though, and the Department of Homeland Security has a variety of mechanisms that they could use to increase their own cybersecurity posture. Another important thing that the Department of Homeland Security needs to do is to incentivize retention for some of their top cybersecurity experts. Over the last several years, the top leadership of the cybersecurity realm in the Department of Homeland Security has gone through 5 leaders. This makes it extraordinarily difficult for them to set and implement coherent policies. So those cybersecurity experts who left for the private sector perhaps would have stayed if given the chance to earn a higher income and or been afforded the chance to work in a more bureaucracy-free environment. That being said, though, there are some that think that perhaps the NCIC isn't the right place to put our cybersecurity resources. Many would argue that U.S. Cybercom is much better suited organizationally and capacity-wise to handle cybersecurity incidents. U.S. Cybercom falls underneath the Department of Defense, though, and that presents a host of issues. The Department of Defense is restricted from conducting operations on the homeland under our Constitution. Therefore, it would be very difficult for Cybercom to put all of its capabilities to work for cybersecurity across the entire federal interagency. I would suggest that it is a much better strategy to allow the NCCIC to coordinate the DoD and federal response to cybersecurity incidents, much akin to the way that FEMA handles the response to natural disasters, whereby National Guard and active duty units can be called in to provide support to civil authorities, which is firmly entrenched in military doctrine and in our legal codes. This would be a much better way to use military resources that we have available, and U.S. Cybercom is preparing response teams to act in coordination with the NCCIC's U.S. CERT teams, who are there to respond to cyber attack both in the public and the private domain. Additionally, it is very important that the NCCIC build relationships with private sector partners. The private sector, as I mentioned earlier, holds the majority of the internet backbone. Therefore, they must be incentivized to comply with cybersecurity norms that will create a more secure environment upon which the United States can conduct its economic activities, as well as ensure that free flow of information. The NCCIC, acting as the single source of information or coordination, would also make international cooperation easier. Right now, a nation that wanted to share information with the United States on a cyber threat would have upwards of 40 different federal or DoD agencies that it could choose from to start its interactions. Creating the NCCIC as the single federal coordinator would streamline that process. And this brings us to some of the problems inherent in the global commons that the internet has become. International treaties do not adequately cover the difficulties that cybercrime, cyberterrorism, and state-sponsored cyber attack pose to the international community. The difference in opinion between Western nations and large cyber threat countries like Russia and China cause problems when it comes to cooperation on transnational crime and terrorism, and also fails to protect the human rights of dissidents in countries that control their information very closely, like Russia and China. If the United States were to enter into multi- and bilateral agreements with like-minded countries, we would set a legal precedence in international law that would allow cyber criminals, terrorists, and state sponsors of cyber attack to be punished under international law. This then flows into a discussion of cyber deterrence. Cyber deterrence is very difficult. It's hard to attribute attacks to individuals or nations or groups, and it is also very easy for people to launch a cyber attack. So the cost of entry is low, the chance of being caught is also low, and the impact can be disastrous for the person, the nation, or organization being attacked. So it is a very desirable course of action for a variety of malicious actors across the internet. However, if the United States had a very clear declaratory policy and an obviously well-coordinated response, such attacks might be deterred because the calculus of risk would be changed. Should the United States be able to marshal its ability to attribute and then to participate in an active defense or even offensive cyber measures, those who wish to launch an attack might think twice about doing so because the risk for capture or destruction of their own infrastructure might be increased. Thus, the United States does need to fully explain the red lines that would need to be crossed in order to trigger certain activities like active cyber defense, cyber attack, and also physical attack should the offending activity result in physical destruction of any U.S. assets. In conclusion, I think that it is extraordinarily important that the United States create a policy whereby there is a single federal coordinator for all cybersecurity incidents. It makes it easier for us to work with our international partners, and it also makes the response to cyber attack more swift and accurate, and thus leads to a deterrent against disastrous cyber attack in the future. Thank you.